Good evening, my friends. Today we're going to play a little bit with time and space. And so we're going to pretend, because why not? Because time is an illusion, that this is 1958, and somehow or another we are still a community of masters' disciples, and we've been living together for a wonderful period of time. And in that year, 1958, I had the marvelous opportunity to go down to Southern California. And being a devoted disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda, and he only being 6 years away from this world, I sought out everyone who knew him. And I had a particular connection with his first disciple in America, Dr. Lewis, who had remarkable experiences with Master and was a loyal disciple until the very end of Master's life and his own life. And I managed to explain to him that there was a whole family of disciples of Master who would be so eager to have him come and visit. Well, he was a little reluctant, but I knew where the power was in the house, so I talked to Mrs. Lewis, and then the two of us ganged up on him, and he was willing to come. So here we are tonight, very, very fortunate to be in the presence of one who knew Yogananda and is eager and generous to share with us what that life was like. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Lewis. Thank you so much, Doctor, for coming.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Asha, and thank you for inviting me.
My joys. And thank you to Mrs. Lewis, too, please.
Hello, my friends. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and thank you for coming. As many of you know by studying along our path, I was one of the first disciples of Master, and we met in Boston in 1920. I'm here to share some reminiscences about Master, and especially about his human side, because we often forget that. In the light of an avatar, we can be blinded to the human that inhabits that form that God is speaking through. And what is an avatar? Well, it's an easy word to say, but it's harder to understand. We in this room are all working through karma. Now, an avatar is born without karma. He is inwardly detached from the world around him, and he is one in and omnipresent and omniscient in the consciousness of God. So, and Master, although detached from the world in this way, still through his human form, he had expression. He had great energy, great enthusiasm and joy, and very strong determination to accomplish whatever he willed to do. Master was a master of himself, and he gave many precise insights to his disciples. Wherever he went, he attracted friends, people like a magnet. Drawing iron, people would be attracted to him and would come to be with him. He slept very, very little. You'd be surprised at how little he slept. But when he was awake, he spent all his time in meditation or helping others, inspiring others along the path of self-realization. Whenever he had to talk about the scriptures, he would go into meditation, seclusion and meditation, so that he would be a pure channel of God's light. Everything he did, as I said, he did with great zeal, and the strong will that he had, he used in many situations which may have been difficult for him. Many of you have heard my own story of how I came to know the Master, and I'll tell it again, because every time I tell it a little bit differently. It was a fine October day in 1920, and I'm a dentist. So as I was leaving my dental office in Davis Square in Somerville, Massachusetts, walking diagonally across that square, a strange figure passed me by. The strange figure was wearing a long orange coat, orange puttees, which are the pants that they wear in India, high-top orange lace-up boots, and he had a large orange turban on his head. Now, this is Somerville, 1920, Massachusetts. Little did I realize that the strange figure that passed me and disappeared across the square was Swami Yogananda, as he was known at that time, and later became known as Paramhansa Yogananda. Well, I didn't meet the Master until Christmas Eve of that same year, 1920. My wife, Mildred, met him first, and she insisted that I go meet him. So I made an appointment to see him at Unity House in Park Square in Boston. I was not enthusiastic about going to meet him, well, for the simple reason that I was somewhat prejudiced. I had heard many stories about the fakirs of India and their strange comings and doings, and I was not about to be fooled or taken in by such people. Nevertheless, as I have said, I condescended to meet the Master at this time. I distinctly remember that as I entered the room at Unity House, he gave me a little smile. We exchanged greetings, and we sat down to talk about various matters along religious lines. I asked him, I said, Master, I didn't call him Master then, let me backtrack. I said, Sir, I have looked in many scriptures, and I have asked many people the meaning of such phrases such as, if thy eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. I have been unable to find an answer anywhere, or no one's been able to provide me with any information about that. So he said to me, looking right at me, if the blind lead the blind, they both fall into the ditch. Well, this seemed an obvious answer to me, and I respected what he had to say because it was Jesus' words from our own Bible. And it seemed a reasonable answer to my question. Well, being an outspoken American, I said to him, Sir, have you seen such things? Do you know the single eye? He said, yes, I think so. Well, do you think I can see such things? And he said, yes, I think so. And I said, well, show me. Well, what he did next was surprising. He procured a tiger skin rug. Now, this was a real tiger skin, 1920, Massachusetts. And he laid it on the floor, and he sat at one end and pointed to the other end and said, Doctor, would you mind sitting across from me? And I looked at him, and he was sitting cross-legged on the floor, on the tiger skin. Well, I had never sat cross-legged under such circumstances, but I said, certainly. So somehow I managed to get down cross-legged on the floor across from him, and I assure you it wasn't the lotus position. I was sitting cross-legged across from him, and he said to me, Doctor, will you always love me as I love you? I had never been asked such a question before in my life, but I looked at his face. He was looking at me. And I saw something I had never seen in anyone before. And before I knew it, I said, yes, I will. And then he rubbed his hands together and smiled and said, fine, that's fine. I take charge of your life. Well, what he meant at the time, I had no idea. But it sounded right. So I acquiesced and we proceeded. So we were sitting there and I looked into his face. And I didn't see anything of ego that such an elevated consciousness might show. If you have the power to bring someone else into the presence of God, a human element can be present. But there wasn't anything. There was just humility. There was just love. There was just caring. And there was happiness that he was able to bring another devotee, another person, into the presence of God. Well, this was impressive to me because I consider humility to be one of my deep inspirations. And someone with his power and with that true humility which he demonstrated, that's a great person. That's a great soul. So the next thing he did was he leaned forward and he pressed his forehead against my forehead. And he instructed me to raise my vision till I was focused on the point between my eyebrows. And I did that. Now, he did not suggest that I see anything or say anything at all that would influence what I saw. What I saw came naturally. And I saw the single eye. And I was lost in that single eye. I just let it flow through me. I have never seen anything like that before. I had never to that point. Oh, and that vision has never left me. It is still with me as I tell you this story tonight. Okay, so the master again leaned forward after this episode and pressed his head against my head one more time. And it is then that I saw the 1,000 rays of the many lighted lotus flower, the many-rayed lotus flower. Many, many silver leaves and beautiful, beautiful, many-colored rays. It's an exquisite thing that I saw, and not an everyday experience. Well, after seeing these many wonderful things that I saw, I was so grateful to this great man of realization. But he looked at me, he had more to say. He looked at me again and said, "Doctor, promise me that you will not avoid me." I was only too glad to promise that. But little did I realize how difficult it would be to keep my promise in the difficult middle ground of discipline. But I did keep my promise. I did keep my promise, and it saved me much delusion and much suffering. Now, I'm an American, and I have received many things from America, and I am grateful, very grateful for all the things that I have received. But India gave me spiritual realization, and that spiritualization came from Master. So I am very grateful to India as well. I have my stories that I want to tell you all in a row here, so I don't forget to tell you any of them. Okay, so about Master, something that maybe some of you don't know. Every Sunday at every Ananda church, when there's a service, a Sunday service, the ministers come out and they ask you how you feel. They say, "How feels everyone?" And you respond, "Awake and ready." Well, Master would do this, but he would come flying out from behind the stage, and his long hair flapping and flowing behind him, and he would run. He would run to the center of the stage, and he would ask everyone, "How feels everyone?" And when they answered, as you just answered right now, he said, "Oh, I don't believe you. I can't hear you. How feels everyone?" Awake and ready. Thank you. Now, why did he do that? Well, he did that because in order to receive the blessings and the power of God which were flowing through him, your energy, the audience's energy, the congregation's energy had to rise to a certain level. There had to be a certain vibration so that he can communicate and reach them at that level. He had to prime the pump, so to speak. Do you feel different? Yeah. His early years in America, the 20s and 30s, he spent a lot of time traveling across the country, speaking at venues large and small. Sometimes a couple of hundred people, sometimes thousands of people would come to hear him speak. It was almost faddish to go listen to Master speak. People would come and listen to him and in great numbers, and then they would go out afterwards and have coffee or martinis or whatever. And I distinctly remember that at one time, one venue in Massachusetts, 5,000 people came, 5,000 people. Now, after each talk, Master would also announce that the next day there would be a class to follow up on what was offered at the talk. So 5,000 people came to this venue, and I was happy backstage looking out into the audience when I peeked around the corner, and I said, Master, so many people are going to come to the class tomorrow. Can we accommodate them all? And he said, 5 people will come. And I said, that's impossible, Master. Look how many people are out there. But the next day at the class, 5 people came. Just 5 people. And my thought on that was that it's very easy to attend a lecture about the spiritual path and what is offered. But to put the teachings of a great master into practice in everyday life is not easy. It's entirely difficult, and it takes that discipline and will and that strength to follow up on what you know to be true instead of going off on a tangent that is difficult to return from. I never understood why many thousands of people didn't respond to Master as I did until I discovered how hard it was, how difficult it was to stay on a spiritual path and to take to heart the teachings of a great master. Master coming to America in 1920. Now, India was a lot different than it is now. Now, it's a little bit more, the world is a little bit more homogeneous, but India is still quite different now, believe me. But at that time, it was way different. So the cultural differences were deep, and Master was not immune to cultural differences. He was in human form and interacting in human situations. For example, Master lived with us for about the first 3.5 years he was in Boston. He lived with us part-time, most of the time, during the week, and on the weekends, he had a little room in downtown Boston, and the little room had a kitchen in it, a screen that separated the kitchen area from the bedroom and meditation area. Let's see, when he stayed with us in our home in 24 Electric Avenue in Somerville, Massachusetts. The home is still there, by the way, and it's still in great condition, and it is a place of pilgrimage for many of Master's disciples. So when he was staying with us, he would love, especially in the warm weather, to take a drive in the evening. And he especially loved the area. There was a park near Mystic Lakes, and this was a beautiful state park. And this was springtime, so he loved to drive through that park. And so we were driving through the park, and the flowers in spring were voluminous. They were all over the place. And Master said, "Wait, stop the car, Doctor, stop the car." So I stopped the car, and Master got out, and he began running across a newly planted grassy area. And I just watched him run, his hair flying behind him, and he ran over to a place where many beautiful flowers were growing, and he started picking them. Like crazy, filled his arms with the flowers and brought them back running to the car and looked at me with a beautiful smile and said, "I picked these for you, Doctor." Well, I was looking over my shoulder, and believe me, I stepped on the gas and got out of there before the park police would come by. And later I said to Master, in America, in a state park, probably not a good idea to pick the flowers. And he just smiled and laughed. Also in India at that time, and that's one of the cultural things that is different. Another cultural thing is that also in India at that time, bathing facilities were primitive. And when he was staying with us on 24 Electric Avenue in Somerville, as I have said, on the bedroom level, there was a bathroom, a beautiful white tile bathroom. I think it still exists, actually, in the same way. And there was a tub in the bathroom, and around the tub was a kind of a circular bar that a shower curtain hung from. Well, Master loved to shower there in the morning. He loved that room. And water would go flying everywhere, and every towel in the bathroom was full of water after his shower. And he was so happy and enthusiastic and pleased that he had such a wonderful experience. And of course, my wife Mildred, Mrs. Lewis, was beside herself. We were kind of newly married, and she was learning the chores of keeping a house clean and providing. And so she took it a little harder than I did. But Master would come downstairs and after a shower, and he would talk with Mildred about what to make for lunch for me. I was already at the dental office, and I would come home for lunch and be served by Master and Mrs. Lewis, and then I would go back to work. So Master would come down full of enthusiasm, talking about what they'd make for lunch for me, and after I left, they talked more about what they would make for dinner. And dinners were wonderful while Master was living with us, because every dinner we had different guests, and Master would help prepare the Indian food that we ate. And we would sit around to the wee hours of the morning talking about the Hindu scriptures and discussing all kinds of things. It was an especially wonderful time because our children, Bradford and Brenda, in 1920, Brenda was 1 year old and Bradford was 3 years old. And as they got a little older, they would call Master Swamiji, which instead of Swamiji, they would call him Swamiji. The cultural differences between India and the United States, America, weren't limited to the Indians' experience. They also were part of Americans' experiences as well. One time, some of Master's devotees from India came over, and of course, the Indian devotees came up to Master, they knelt at his feet, and they touched his feet. Now, we Americans had never, ever seen anything like this before. This was very strange and unusual to us. In retrospect, in later years, we learned that that is the Indian way, insofar as they recognize the Guru as being in the consciousness of God and being a representative of God on earth. And then I thought, well, if Jesus Christ walked down this aisle right now, we'd probably all fall on our knees before him. And that's what the reverence that they were showing to Master at that time. It took Americans a while to learn this type of reverence, and it comes slowly. It comes slowly to Americans. Those of you who have given talks in India, you'll know that sometimes an Indian person will come up to you and say, well, what is your power? Yes? And, well, I don't know how you guys answered it, but Master never answered that question. He just smiled when asked that by anyone. But he demonstrated his power in many ways. Did he make miracles? Well, I'll tell you some stories, and you can decide whether they're miracles or not. After a while, in the late 20s, Master moved to Los Angeles, the Los Angeles area. And in that area, very often, he and his disciples would walk on the beach. Well, we were still practicing in Somerville. I was still practicing in Somerville. And, but every August for my summer vacation and every Christmas, Mildred, Mrs. Lewis, and I would visit Master in Los Angeles, and we would often walk on the beach. Well, one time we were walking on the beach, several disciples, and we were carrying picnic baskets because we were going to a jetty to have a picnic lunch. Well, as we were walking, and Master had done something to his leg. I forget what it was, but he was using a cane, and he could walk all right. The cane just gave him a little bit better stability. Well, we were walking, and as we were walking, there was a dead pelican. It looked dead to me. Its limbs were all twisted and strange contortions, and its feathers were all matted, and there was sand on top of it, and its eyes weren't open. And we looked at it, and I said to Master, I asked him, Master, can you do something about this? And Master, one of his typical answers that I heard from day one when I met him, he said, I think so. So he took his cane, and very gently, almost imperceptibly, he touched the pelican. Well, what do you think happened? The pelican jerked and jerked and jerked and did all these contortions, got up, shook its wings, and flew away. Was that a miracle? To me it was. I was there. I saw the pelican. I knew what it looked like before Master touched it. All right. Brenda, my daughter, was born with some kind of an affliction. And we didn't know. She was never diagnosed as to what that affliction was. But she would often experience seizures, convulsions. And she would go rigid and start shaking, and her eyes would blink. It was terrible to witness. Well, I had schooled Mrs. Lewis on what to do in such circumstances. And this was a Sunday night, and I was in Boston proper with Master in his little room after a Sunday talk. And after a Sunday talk, we would go to his little room, and he would make an Indian snack, and then we would drive back to Somerville, to our house in Somerville, where he would spend the beginning of the week. Well, Master was preparing food, and the telephone rang. and Mrs. Lewis called. And Mrs. Lewis was frantic because Brenda was having the strongest contraction that she'd ever had. Well, I told Mrs. Lewis what to look for and told her we would be home very soon. Well, Master looked at my face when I got off the phone and said, "What's wrong, doctor?" And I explained to him about Brenda's convulsions. And he stopped what he was doing. And he went behind his screen. And it was quiet for a few moments. And I just stood there and waited. Well, after a short while, maybe 7 or 8 minutes, Master came out. And he looked at me and he smiled. And he said, "Doctor, Brenda will never have another convulsion like that." Well, I didn't know what to think, to tell you the truth. But we finished our snack and we drove home to Somerville. As soon as we got home, Master went upstairs to Brenda's room and he sat by her crib all night long, meditating and praying. And you can guess what the outcome is. Brenda never had another contraction, another convulsion, another seizure. It was a miracle. As we'll see later in some of the other stories that I'm going to tell you, when an avatar, when a great soul is directly connected to the vibration of the divine, anything is possible. And Swami's strength, Swami Yogananda's strength and focus and attention and devotion and power changed many things. I'm only going to tell you 10 or 12 stories tonight. There are scores of stories, not only from myself, but other disciples as well, with similar occurrences. I'm also asked, when asked about Master, what was he like? You remember that a great soul like this that is giving talks and inspiration, you don't see the human side of them very often. You see the avatar side, especially when they're in front of a group of people or meditating with the avatar. But you don't see things like the sense of humor. Master, if you knew some of the things that Master did, Master loved jokes and he loved humor. And he loved the Christian holidays, of course, Easter, Christmas, and other ones as well. But he also loved Halloween. He would love to see the devotees in different costumes and out on the grounds of the Hermitage in Encinitas. There would be parties there every Halloween. And he would go out and join them and love the costumes, and he had a little water pistol. And he would go, and people would go like that. He loved being a little bit mischievous like that. He was, in a way, sometimes he was like a big child, the way he loved to play, the innocent play in which he engaged. Well, we tried many times to play practical jokes on Master, but he never fell for it, not one time. One time, I'll give you one example. We were out in Alice Hasey's house, who was known as Sister Yogmata. She was one of his first disciples in Boston. And she had a cabin on Plum Island, and we loved to go there because it was away from the city and it was very quiet and we could meditate there. Well, Master, as I said, slept very little, but he took a short afternoon nap. He was fond of taking short afternoon naps. So he was in this room, and outside the room was a little sitting area, and he was taking his nap, and the door was slightly ajar. The door opened out, and Master was there. So we looked into the room, opened the door a little bit, and Master seemed sound asleep. So we tiptoed into the room. we tied a string around Master's ankle and tied the other end of the string to the doorknob, so that when Master got up and moved, he would slam the door shut. Well, we were very gleeful and happy about this until, and sitting outside the room with just rubbing our hands, waiting for the joke to be completed, when we heard this raucous laughter coming from the room, and I can't imitate his laughter, but it was high-pitched. So you tried to play a trick on your Swami. It doesn't work. He knew things that we would do before we did them ourselves, I think. He was very funny in that regard, and he loved humor, as I said. So that was definitely a big part of his life. On a more serious note, my mother and father were still alive at the time in 1921. This was 1921. So, and they had a house near the beach, and my father had a little sailboat. And the sailboat didn't have a motor. It was a little skiff. And it just had a sail and oars. And it was an afternoon that was warm and sunny, and there were some clouds in the distance. They didn't bother us. So my brother, my father, and myself, we got into the boat, and we sailed out about 2 miles. Now, after we sailed out about 2 miles, all of a sudden the wind stopped. The sea was like a sheet of glass, totally calm, nothing moving. Big clouds coming that way. We said, let's go back. There was no wind, so my brother on one oar and I in the other, and we started rowing back. We didn't row back far enough. We rowed back about halfway, about 1 mile, and the wind caught up with us. And it caught up with us with a vengeance. There was lightning, thunder, hail. The ocean was nothing but foam, and our little boat was being tossed around like crazy. And so we put my father under a top near the cockpit, and very soon afterwards we got under the top ourselves. And I thought to myself, as we were being tossed around and buckets of water being dumped on us, and maybe this is the end. I thought about Mrs. Lewis. I thought about my children. And then I remembered something that Master taught me. Master said, whenever there is danger, whenever there is need, you focus on that single eye. You put your attention there, and when the light comes, you bathe in that light. You surround yourself with that light. And I did that. And the light was there. And all my cares dropped away. I knew that no matter what happened, as Master said, I would be safe. Of course, there's a lot of discussion that could go into that, but I won't do that now. I'll just tell you that after a while, the storm began to abate, and we looked toward shore, hopefully, that someone would come out to rescue us. And sure enough, there was a boat coming towards us, and we got a tow back into shore. Our families were waiting on the shore, and we were happy to be reunited. We cleaned up, composed ourselves, and drove back to our home in Somerville. And as we were walking through the door it was about 11 p.m., as we were walking through the door, the phone was ringing. And it was Master on the phone. And I answered it and said, hello. And Master said, hello, doctor, you almost got wet, didn't you? And I was non-committal. I didn't know where he got this information. But then he said again, you almost got wet, didn't you? And I said, yes, but how did you know that? And he didn't answer me. And when I asked him again the next day, he still didn't answer me. But Then I talked to Sister Yogamata. At the time, while we were out on the ocean, Master was at Sister Yogamata's house, and he was reading a book by Emerson about the sea. And she said, and this happened at the exact hour that we were in our deepest trouble. Then she said, all of a sudden, Master jumped up from his chair. He threw the book on the ground and said, Sister, Doctor's in trouble. He's in real trouble. And the Master sat down and was quiet. So again, I confronted Master, and I asked him, Master, you knew we were in trouble, and you interceded, didn't you? And he said, very simply, yes. A very powerful moment for me, just to recognize and bathe in the power of the Master and how he interceded with God on our behalf. As I stand before you now, I know that without Master's intercession, we probably would not have survived that storm. A little later, after Master had moved to Los Angeles already, Mildred was trying to steady a boat that was about to fall off a trailer. And while she was trying to steady the boat, she had a massive heart attack, and she fell on the ground. Well, she was saved, and she was transported to the hospital and saved, and her cardiologist told her, well, if you do these things that I'm going to tell you to do, you may live another 5 years. So for 5 years, another 5 years. And then Mildred, painstakingly and without even batting an eyelash, did everything the doctor asked her to do. But still, she could hardly get up and walk from a living room chair across a room to another chair without feeling all tired. She was very weak. But still, later that same year, we took a trip to California to visit Master. And when we were in the room with him, he looked at Mildred, he told me to wait, and he took Mildred out onto the porch. And I don't know what he told her, but he held her hands and gave her some instruction that she never told me. And she never told the children either. But Mildred completely recovered to the point where when we went back to Massachusetts and she saw her cardiologist, the cardiologist said, what have you been doing? Even in strict convalescence, it's impossible for this to happen, for this type of recovery to happen. Again, it's a small thing. And with what we see on TV every day and the so-called fantasies on TV, we become a little bit inured to true miracles and to the true use of God's energy to intercede in the material realm when it is God's will to do so. This was an important lesson for us. Nothing is impossible for God. And when a true master is plugged into this divine energy, nothing is impossible to come through the master as well. So Mildred recovered, and she lived many years after that. But another thing happened, which to me is a miracle. We were visiting, Mildred and I were visiting Mount Washington on one of our many trips, and we were going somewhere. We were actually going to the Hollywood Bowl to listen to a classical concert conducted by a woman composer named Antonia Brica, who was very famous at the time. And we were, all the group of devotees were standing around the car waiting for Master to come down from up above on Mount Washington. And we were waiting. Master was always late. And he was always late not because he was slow at doing anything. He was late because people demanded things of him. The phone rang, people asked him questions, and he was taking care of people. So whenever we went anywhere, he would be a little bit slow in coming to the car because of the circumstances. Well, we were all waiting there, looking at our watches and pacing, and I just had my hand resting on the jamb of the door of the car. Now, cars in those days, heavy sheet metal, heavy doors. So it wasn't the lightweight cars that we have today. So I had my hand, it was actually my right hand, I'm right-handed, on the jamb, and Mrs. Lewis didn't see it. So she slammed the door, and she slammed it right on my fingers. And I looked at my fingers, and they were crushed from the second joint down. The fingers of my right hand were crushed. And Mildred looked at it, and I looked at it. I was in tremendous pain. I was, I wasn't being macho about it. I was feeling pain, and I was letting the world know. But I was thinking, and Mildred told me later that she was thinking the same thing, how was I going to work? I'm a dentist. I'm right-handed. This was a Thursday night. The next day, Friday morning, we were boarding a train to go back to Massachusetts, and Monday morning I would be hard at work, working with my patients. So Mildred ran upstairs to Master, where Master was, and she said, she told him what had happened, and Master said, Mildred, Mrs. Lewis, he called her, don't talk anymore. Just go down and tell Dr. Lewis to put his hand inside his coat, which I did, and to not look at it at all for 3 days. Well, this was hard to do, but I managed not to look at my hand for 3 days, and whenever I had my coat on or something on, I would keep my hand hidden. Well, I didn't feel any pain. The next day, we got on the train, went back to Boston. Monday morning, my hand was normal. There was just a slight mark across my knuckles that reminded me of what had transpired. I was able to put in a full day work on Monday. Miracle? Attunement with God. What we're all striving for, right? Attunement with God so that we can bring that grace down into our own lives. Now, many of you know that in those days, later on in the 1940s, Master had a little house at 29 Palms. And it was in the middle of the desert. And it was a beautiful little place, and the desert was magnificent. In those years, there weren't military bases there. There were very few houses, and there wasn't the population growth that has taken over since that time. But Master and I would often walk in the evening when it was cooler, and the sun was at a lower angle, and we would talk about the extreme beauty that we were seeing. It wasn't a desert like the Sahara Desert, if you know 29 Palms. The desert was like a painted desert. There were joshua trees all over the place. Colors, especially when the sun was at a lower angle, colors and shadows. And we would remark to each other that walking in God's paradise was how magnificent it was. Well, I was always dressed formally. I'm from the East Coast and from Boston, and I'm a professional. I always wore a suit and tie, no matter what the weather. And I had on a blue fedora-type hat that my daughter Brenda had given me. And I loved that hat because she gave it to me. I also liked the style of it. Well, we had gotten out of the car. We drove to a certain place, and there was no road there. We just drove across the desert. And we got out of the car, and we were walking, enjoying ourselves, when a wind picked up, and it blew the hat right off my head. And it was tumbling really fast in front of us, and we ran after it, but the wind drove the hat faster than we could keep up with it. So we just watched it go and went back to the car, and I thought that was that. Goodbye, hat. That's all it took. Well, in the morning, Master said, "Doctor, go back out in the desert and you will find your hat." Well, by this time, a corner of my mind thought, not likely, but by this time, obedience was something that, a hard-won attribute that Master had taught me. So I practiced obedience again and trust. And I went back out into the desert. I didn't know where I was going because the wind had covered all the tracks. But I approximated where we might have been. And again, it all looked the same to me. It was impossible to tell. But I started walking, and you know what happened, right? In the distance, there was a creosote bush, and stuck so that I could see only part of it in that creosote bush was my blue fedora. So I went and retrieved it and brought it back. And again, a coincidence? You know, miracles come in many sizes, big and small, and depending on how you want to look at it, as coincidence or a miracle, you can look at it that way. To me, my time with Master the whole time was one big miracle, and then inside that time, many things happened that showed me the power of divine attunement. My mother, this is a great story. My mother was born in 1861 during the Civil War. In 1926, she was still alive, and she had a massive stroke. And I tried to phone Master. The doctor said she probably wouldn't survive the night. I tried to phone Master, but Master was unreachable, out of town. So all I could do was pray. I would pray to Master to intercede on my mother's behalf. Well, my mother survived, and she lived another little bit of time, and then she had another stroke. And this was even more serious than the first. And I went to ask Master again to intercede on her behalf, and Master said, "Doctor, God has already interceded for you. She will live about 4 more months. 4 more months later, to the day, almost to the hour, she passed away." Now, that's not the end of the story. A few years later, Master came up to me and said, "Guess what? Your mother has been reborn." And I said, "Wow, where is she?" And he said, "She's in northern Maine." And I said, "Let's go see her." So I don't know how, but he found the family that she was reborn into, and we went to visit her. And I looked at her, and the resemblance to my own mother was uncanny. I had goosebumps all over, is all I can say. And some of her mannerisms, the way she spoke, were exactly those mannerisms which characterized my mother. Now, she didn't recognize me, but she had great affection for me, and I for her. And that's a very potent and powerful memory in my life, to see my mother reborn. If she were alive now, I don't know if she's alive or not, she would be about 84, 85 years old. All right. Okay. All right. I asked Master when I first met him and knew what I had to do. I asked Master, why not give me the whole thing now? I want it now. Why do I have to go through all this stuff? American, right? Impatient American. Well, Master said, Doctor, can you take a million volts? I thought for a moment. I had to admit, no, I couldn't take a million volts. So what Master went on to explain to me was that the only way that you can do that is through love. That you can know God only through the love you have for him. When the love you have for him is total, uncompromised, without any other thought or distraction, then you will know God. Then you will know what it is like to be one with God, in the presence of God. That's all Master tried to do with us, is to bring us into the presence of God in the moment. With him, we could experience that on our own. That disappeared. But that's what the avatar is for, is to remind us of what we strive to and where we need to go. Now, along those lines, Master wrote me a letter, and it's a little bit embarrassing because he praises me, and the praise was a little bit undue, but I respected his vision and I accepted it. It's hard for me to accept compliments or accept praise, but Master would give praise when it was warranted, and he would give a compliment when it was warranted, and it wasn't a fake compliment. It came from his insight and the bottom of his heart. He wanted to remind me that the only reality that exists is the oneness that we are trying to achieve with God. He would point this out in every talk, almost every talk that he gave, that this was what we were doing. And what he says here, although it's addressed to me, it applies to every one of you in this room and everyone outside of this room. It isn't unique to me. He said, Dear Dr. Lewis, words fail to express what you have done for Sat Sangha. Babaji, Lahiri Mahashaya, and my own master's hands, Swami Sri Yukteswar, I see working through yours. You have inspired me. Me inspiring Master, oh. You have been the golden instrument of God's touch to manifest his work. You have shown me again that God helps when everyone else fails. And with the almighty strength, I humbly bless you, that he may be pleased to give you more power, instill in you the immortal nectar of realization. May he give you unceasing faith and fulfill your desires and make you prosperous in every single way. Oh, my heart is shining with power as it never was, that God has selected such an unworthy nothingness as me to do his work. Your spirit is with me, Doctor. The real you is now coming into the limelight. Be not afraid, child of eternal lightning. Child of eternal lightning. March on with unperturbed, steady steps, elbowing through a million darknesses. This is for all of us, yes? Why, what is body? What is this passing show? They're gone. But the candles that you are lighting and burning in your Father's house will show you your path here and forever. The Master went on to talk about mundane things like his talks and ask about Mildred's health, but he signed it, "Affectionately yours, Swami Yogananda Giri." So, Master's saying, don't be discouraged. Keep on meditating. Keep on practicing. Stay on the path. Don't be distracted. Continue lighting those candles in the house of God, in the presence of God, and they will continue to guide you until you are finally one with the great infinite. Such are the words of Master, and this is what we're all striving for, and this is why we're here, to heed those words and to put into practice everything we know to be true in every moment of our lives. Now, I'm going to invite my friend Biraj to please come up and sit at the harmonium, because we're nearing the end of our evening. And there are just two more things I'd like to do. Letter like the one that Master just sent me, and other things that I experienced with Master, inspired me to write just a couple of poems and to write one song. And I'll read for you one of the poems and ask your participation in a moment, and I will ask my good friend Biraj to lead us in singing the song, which many of you already know. This is a poem I wrote, inspired, of course, by Master and everything that he has given me. I give this poem to all of you this evening as well. Creeping inward, creeping upward, diving deep within, we find treasures lasting and uplifting. Best of all, that peace sublime. Many lives we spent in serving senses, passions, and mind's whim, and have missed our own true being, oneness with the God within. Let us therefore give this one life to fight for higher gain, with the hope when life starts ebbing, the task was not in vain. O great God above in heaven, hear our cry, we pray tonight. Keep us steadfast in thy wisdom. Keep us always in thy light. I'm going to read that last verse again, line by line, and I'd like you to repeat it after me, loud, loud, so God can hear your voices. Close your eyes. Go to that place between your eyebrows where we know the single eye with its great light, where the many rays of the silver petal lotus exists. Go into that light. Even if you don't see that light, pretend that it is there. After a while, the pretense becomes real, and it is no longer pretending. Go into that light and repeat with me. O great God above in heaven, hear our cry, we pray tonight. Hear our cry, we pray tonight. Keep us steadfast in thy wisdom. Keep us always in thy light.
So silently and sweetly the Master comes to me. His love and joy enfold in bliss and ecstasy. My mind in calm and peaceful, all cares are swept away, and in His omnipresence I know that I am free. My mind is calm and peaceful, all cares are swept away, and in His omnipresence I know that I am free. So sweet the sound of Om, 'tis Master's voice I hear, in all pervading silence He whispers, I am here. My heart with joy is flowing, it sings eternally. There is no other love like the Master's love for me. My heart with joy is flowing, it sings eternally. There is no other love like the Master's love for me. So silently and sweetly the Master comes to me. His love and joy enfold me in bliss and ecstasy. My mind is calm and peaceful, all cares are swept away, and in His omnipresence I know that I am free. My mind is calm and peaceful, all cares are swept away, and in His omnipresence I know that I am free. So sweet the sound of Om, 'tis Master's voice I hear, in all pervading silence He whispers, I am here. My heart with joy is flowing, it sings eternally. There is no other love like the Master's love for me. My heart with joy is flowing, it sings eternally. There is no other love like the Master's love for me. There is no other love like the Master's love for me. There is no other love like the Master's love for me.